morning everyone. My name is Agastya Vishnath and today I want to break down Niccolo Paganini. Now Paganini was a very prolific classical composer and his name is very famous in the classical community, especially amongst the violin community because he pretty much wrote solely for violin. He was one of the most influential, one of the most innovative and prolific and skillful composers of his time. As famous as he is for his music which is very difficult and very virtuosic, he's also very famous for his character, for his skillfulness and his virtuosity. He's known much more as a virtuoso than a composer because that's in essence what he was. He's been one of the most influential figures if you look at the way the violin instrument evolved over the 1800s and how its repertoire was built up. And today I want to take a closer look at him and see how is his music, what was his life like, what is special about his music, why is his music so popular, what makes it so difficult, and how does that being difficult still make it attractive. And hopefully we get a better understanding of his character walking away from this. So I first want to talk about his life and his life experiences and what he did in his life, and then I'll take a turn and talk about his music, what music he wrote, why he wrote that music, what's so special about that music that we hold held in such high regard today. So coming to his life. Niccolo Paganini, as we know him, was born in 1782 in Genoa, which was currently in Italy. He was born to Antonio Paganini and Teresa Paganini. As a child, Teresa Paganini really wanted Paganini to grow up and become a violinist. And at the age of 5, he learned the mandolin, which was an instrument that his father would play. So he learned the mandolin, and then at age 7, he picked up the violin. Initially, he learned from his father, but it was very clear from the beginning that he had incredible potential in that field. He picked it up extremely fast and was already playing at an advanced level. Now, Paganini is very famous for being very tall and very skinny and had very long and flexible fingers. His physiology was very attuned to play the violin and allowed him to do things which regular humans struggle to do. And many people attributed this to him potentially or allegedly having Marfan syndrome, which causes a lot of these things due to problems with connective tissue. And so it's rumored that he had Marfan syndrome as a child and growing up, and that's why he was so virtuosic. That was at least one of the factors. Regardless, he would learn the violin from his father, was extremely virtuosic, and then thus was referred to multiple teachers throughout Genoa. And what was funny is a lot of those teachers would quickly find out that Paganini was out of their depth. They didn't have anything to teach him, and they would refer him to their teachers. And this process continued for a while. Some of his most notable teachers were Alessandro Rolla, Ferdinando Payer, and most notably Gaspero Ghiretti. Now, while he didn't learn from these, he didn't learn with these violinists for too long, they definitely influenced how he composed. So, Paganini made his first appearances in public around when he was 15. But he toured a little bit with his father during the years 16 and 17. But when he became 18, he gained independence from his father went back on his own business, and that's when Paganini really shined. Now, throughout the middle portion of his life, Paganini had multiple jobs at courthouses or at royalty, and taught many royal people, and was a court composer and violinist for many royal houses or courtrooms. But his most famous, his most influential, and his most profitable endeavors were the freelance endeavor. So ever since he gained independence in 18, he had a very successful freelance career. And what you have to understand about Paganini is he is what we would call probably the first pop star. It was not only his music that was so admired for being extremely virtuosic, extremely difficult, extremely interesting and intricate, but his showmanship, his charisma, his attitude, his presence was what propelled him. When you were watching him do things on stage, you weren't only listening to his music, you were looking at him. He was one of the first people to play without sheet music, which was uncommon at that time, and that allowed him to do all sorts of prolific and escapadial things on stage. He was, in many senses, the word a showman. He showed off his skills and he built a character and a charisma and a persona for himself. And most of the example of things he would do on stages, allegedly he was sabotaged, but it's most likely that due to the fact that violin strings at that time were not very strong, they were made from gut, they snapped. So while he was allegedly giving a performance, one of his strings snapped, and he kept on going. It didn't even phase him. And of course, that makes it significantly harder to play. And then before he knew it, another string snap, and then another one. And he continued to play, and he was only playing on one string. On one string, he played an entire concerto. And that is something that's characteristic of the kind of thing that Paganini would try to pull off, both in his music and his performances. And that's what earned him so much fame. Now, as I already mentioned, he was extremely skillful. He was a virtuoso, and was often the only person, and wrote music like that. He was often the only person alive at that point in time who could play the music that he wrote. And thus, there were a lot of rumors about how he got his virtuosity. And the most famous being that he sold his soul to the devil. This gave Paganini the nickname the Devil's Violinist. Many have hypothesized that he sold his soul to the devil. And multiple misinterpretations of events that happened around him sort of supported this theory. Other people came up with theories that he was imprisoned for murder and had plenty of time to practice in his jail cell, or that he would consume the brains of his rivals in order to gain their skills. Of course, all hogwash. Regardless, he was an extremely skillful virtuosic player, and he knew about these devil violinist these hypotheses. And while he didn't like them, I assume he didn't like them, he did know how to benefit out of them. So you'd often find him playing in cemeteries or graveyards to market the idea that he's the devil's violinist. He's got this seducing charm. And that was indeed what you expect him to do. That's what he did. So that was something that he was very good at doing. And as I said, so Paganini in the early parts of his life, the early parts of his solo career, started touring around the Italy region, where Genoa was at that time very close to and now located. But later in his life, he received acclaim and started moving to Britain, started doing tours in Britain, Scotland, France, and many other countries. And he was always very, very locally popular in Genoa and Italy. Now his name spread a lot farther, and you could see him in countries like Britain. And that was quite interesting. And it's got to the point, his fame got so big that in the 1820s, he received the Golden Spur, the Order of the Golden Spur, which is an order that Mozart also received from the Pope. The Pope recognized him and gave them the special accolade. And that was something that was quite notable, one of his biggest accolades of his career. Anyways, so that's what Paganini would do for until he was about 30 and 40. Now, one thing to note is that due to this fame that Paganini acquired, as I said, he was in many sense one of the first pop stars. He had that persona. Due to the fame that Paganini acquired throughout this period, especially the early period when he was 18 and older, due to that fame, he developed many vices and picked up some undesirable habits. He was an excessive and frequent gambler and an excessive and frequent womanizer, among many other things. And this caused him multiple problems throughout his life. He is alleged to have gambled away a Stradivari violin, which is the most valuable, even today, one of the most valuable violins, one of the highest tier of violins, and he gambled it away. That's how bad his gambling addiction got. And that was very early on in his life. So he continued to have missteps due to these type of things. Now later, when he reached his 40s, we're talking about 1834 here approximately, what happened was his health started to decline a lot. Now Paganini was no stranger to chronic diseases. As I said, he's alleged, or it's hypothesized that he had Marfan syndrome, but before that he's also had multiple chronic diseases, but this got especially worse in the 1830s, when he contracted syphilis. And of course, as you can see, this is a disease that killed many people at the time. And what's worse is the treatment for syphilis at that time, the 1830s, was to take mercury, a mixture of mercury and opium, to drink that. And as you can imagine, on top of having syphilis, to deal with this physiological and anatomical side effects of drinking mercury and opium twice a day, every day, took a severe toll on his health. But miraculously, he recovered only to fall victim to tuberculosis. So he had multiple chronic diseases towards the end of his life, and this significantly hindered his ability to perform. As I said, he's a performing artist. Most composers don't perform their own works, maybe perform the instrument that they play. Paganini wrote almost exclusively for the violin, and as I said, he's usually the only person alive who could play those pieces based on the amount of skill that they required. So he would always play his own pieces. That was the integral part of his career. And what happened was that due to these diseases, he would try to set up tours and only had them fail due to his health. They would have to be cancelled in the middle. So towards the later years of his life, he gave up his solo career due to these health problems and started teaching. Now he tried to start a casino around this time as well, which failed, and then, as I said, multiple financial problems occurred due to that. But he spent his last years teaching children how to play the violin. Well, not all children, but royal children, other children, how to play the violin. And he abided his days as a teacher. Then, towards the end, towards the last 1 week before he died, the Pope allegedly sent a priest to do the last rites on his body, or not on his body, to him. And Paganini at the time thought it was inappropriate. He didn't think he was going to die, he thought it was premature. What's funny is he died a week later after that, and after having refused the last rites to be performed because he thought it was premature. Of course, the media, a lot of people projected this as saying, "Oh, he's a devil's disciple. Why he could never? That's why he refused having the rites performed." And indeed, due to these conspiracies that he's a devil's disciple, he was a devil's violinist, his body, the church refused to bury his body for the longest period of time. It took his son and the Pope to come together to appeal to the Pope, and the Pope finally approved. Even though, as I said, he was appointed the Order of the Golden Spur by the Pope, and yet his body was all the churches refused to bury his body. Finally, after 5 years after his death, the Pope authorized its burial in that specific area, and that's where it rests till date. So that was just a brief of Paganini's life, and understanding the fact that he was a virtuoso and a showman is very important because it's integral to what his music was, and I'll be coming to that now. Now, Paganini is most famous for and most acclaimed and was recognized for, in these days, for three major classes of works. Firstly, we have his 24 caprices, which are very, very famous, which I'll be getting into. Then we have his 6 violin concertos. Then we have his variations on the violin, multiple variations. Now, these are the ones we remember him by today, but Paganini composed over 100 different pieces for violin, for solo guitar, with orchestral backing, and even for quartets. So, but these are the 3 main ones which he performed today, and what he's really remembered by. Now, the 24 caprices are extremely famous. Not only are they extremely famous for being extremely difficult to play, it requires extreme virtuosity to play them, but and they become so popular and so they're well recognized as a standard in the music community that any professional violinist, be it an orchestral violinist or a soloist, who is worth their salt, has at least practiced and mastered one. It's practically an unofficial prerequisite when you're a professional violinist to be able to play at least one of the Paganini caprices. They are a hallmark, they are a standard in violin repertoire. As you go up to the professional level, you need to play some of these, and they are, of course, extremely difficult but extremely interesting at the same time, and introduce a lot of people to different techniques which didn't exist at that period in time and still are not used all that much today. I'll be getting into that in just a bit. Then we have his concertos, which take it to another level. Now, the caprices were relatively short and what is most famous works, but the concertos are so difficult that it's above the weight class of most professional violinists. And it's up to the higher tier soloists or violinists who are aspiring to be soloists to play to have the capabilities to play these type of pieces with finesse. So most professional violinists, as I said, or orchestral violinists cannot properly play these pieces. So that's how hard his 6 concertos go. And his variations, quite a few of his variations are even higher. Go even higher up in the scale. You have God Save the King variations, Enor Copio Non Mi Sento. These are all variations which are so hard to play that it's well recognized as extremely difficult to play, and only the highest tiers of soloists attempt to play them, let alone succeed. So they're extremely hard, they're extremely difficult. Now, for most of you wondering why is his music so difficult? Well, it's a variety of factors. Firstly, most of Paganini's music is written at great speed. You have to be able to play it very, very, very fast. And moving your fingers that fast can sometimes be physically very, very difficult, let alone conceptually understanding where to place them. That's one factor. Another factor is that Paganini uses multiple different techniques. Where he didn't invent a new extremely difficult technique, he used an old difficult technique in much higher frequency than anyone before him. His music, double harmonics, use of octaves, use of thirds, use of left hand pizzicato, all these things were either invented and popularized by him, and as you might imagine, are extremely difficult to play. They're tens of others I can mention, which he either invented or popularized, and those make it very physically difficult to play. As I said, he also had very long fingers, so he would include very high intervals. That means you have to stretch your fingers a lot while playing, and that also makes it extremely difficult. And then a whole other host of reasons why Paganini is difficult, and I'm sure any violinist will be happy to explain to you. Now, coming to those techniques, why I mentioned that he's so innovative is that he created multiple techniques for the violin. And I could demonstrate some, well, I can't demonstrate most of them, but I can tell you how they work. So, one is left hand pizzicato, which some argue existed before his time, but it is definitive that he popularized it. He's the one who took it up and made it something regular. And that's plucking the strings with your left hand. So, usually, right hand pizzicato, which is what you usually have when you pluck your strings like this. The right hand existed, but plucking it with your left hand did not exist before his time, or was at least not popularized. And he's the first one who brought it. And this is and using this was not only fantastical and not only virtuosic, but very creative. You could really it was a new branch of music, and a lot of composers owe Paganini a debt of gratitude for introducing things like this. Other examples include he used very creative bowing. He would have double up bows in his Capriccio number 5 if you look. And in general, his bowing was very complicated, it was often very intricate and very creative. He created new techniques for the bows, and they use harmonics a lot. So you usually press down the string all the way on a violin, but you can also press it half the way. And if you do this the right way, effectively, you can produce a new sound with the same string. That's called a harmonic. And it is extremely hard to produce a solid sound with the harmonic, let alone be able to control it and play something with it. And then he took it a step further and invented something called double harmonics, which are exponentially harder than regular harmonics were. So you can imagine all these different techniques which is creating not only very difficult and contributed to his skill, but were used by many composers after him. So he set the stage for he's pushed the boundaries of what violin could do, both in his own performance and allowed other composers who came after him, who sort of took Paganini's legacy, to use these techniques and be more creative. They were less constrained because now they know that these techniques exist. So a lot of violinists and a lot of composers are very grateful to Paganini for doing that, because that's one of the major things. That's one of the major reasons that he's famous. Coming to the music itself, Paganini's music is characterized by being, of course, as I said, I don't want to keep on repeating myself, very hard, very virtuosic. But in addition to that, it's not just he who was showing, his music itself, just listening to it, you can see the showmanship in it, if that makes sense. That's just a subjective analysis. It's also very light. Usually, it's quite elegant as well, right? And it's also very interesting. And of course, Paganini was an entertainer. As I said, he depended on the audience loving his music. So it's not just the audience was captivated by, oh my god, Paganini can do so many different things, and look how many techniques he's using. But they were also captivated by the music itself, because it is very effective. It's satisfying. It's very interesting. It's exhilarating listening to Paganini's music. And I think that he done a very somewhat similar to Vivaldi, and a very good job of making the music very accessible and interesting and exhilarating to the public eye. That's one other reason why he became so popular, because the music itself was so unique in what it was doing and was not there before. One thing I would not describe Paganini's music as is having much emotional depth. And I just don't think that was what Paganini's aim was when he was writing the music. I doubt that he wanted it to be a full form of expression for the deepest emotions that he felt. But of course, you can attribute some emotions to his things. It is much more similar to some of Mozart's music in that way, where it's light and elegant, but also shallow. It was one thing to entertain an audience. It was not too much. It did not have as much emotional depth as some of Beethoven's works, and that's Beethoven used Beethoven and a lot of other composers of the Romantic period. He used music as a way to express those deepest emotions and sort of share them with the general public. Paganini wasn't trying to do that, according to me, and you don't see that in his music, so it doesn't have much emotional depth. But aside from that, as I said, it's fantastical and that it's exhilarating. It's very satisfying to listen to as well. In addition to all I've said, those are some of the things that characterize Paganini's music. If you're interested in listening to Paganini's music, I would recommend starting off with his caprices, maybe Caprice number 5 and 24, some of the most famous and some acclaimed, and some of the most satisfying. Very good way to introduce you. If you'd like to move up, you might want to listen to some of his concertos, maybe some of his variations as well. He also wrote multiple sonatas and quartets, so once you finish with those, you may want to go see that as well. That being said, I would definitely characterize Paganini is a very influential composer because all that he did for the instrument, that is the violin. He propelled its, as I said, he pushed the boundaries of what it was capable of, and now, thanks to all the techniques that he introduced, composers today and artists today, people who play his music, are capable of having a completely different stage. And I think his music was a gift to the world. I think he was very, his life, you can learn many lessons from it. It's also very interesting life to have led. So I believe at the end of the day, he contributed a lot to the music community, and of course remains one of the most revered and most acclaimed figures in classical music history, let alone violin history. That being said, I hope you found this informative and you took away something from this. Thank you very much, and next time we'll be talking about another composer.